Today, my guest is former WWE Tag Team Champion. You know him as PJ Black. You may remember him as Justin Gabriel. At one point, you were either Nexus or against him. Mr. Black, how are you today?
I'm doing fantastic, man. Just going through some heavy recovery stuff, but other than that, I'm all right.
Sorry to hear that. I hope it's a quicker recovery than expected.
Yeah, we'll see. I don't know. This is probably the worst injury I've ever had. I've been wrestling for 27 years. This is the first time I've been, injured in the ring, and yeah, it's going to be about 6 months or so. So we'll see how
I
that
hate,
goes. I just gotta put the time in.
I hate to hear that. So, where did your wrestling journey begin? What made you fall in love with professional wrestling?
My father was a wrestler and a wrestling promoter in Africa. A lot of people don't know this, but in the 80s, 90s, South Africa was like an unofficial territory, if you can remember the territory days. So I grew up loving the business, and when I was like 12, like 13 years old, I started refereeing matches for my dad's company. And once I was in there and I saw how the magic was done, I was like, yep, this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life.
So, how was it? You said like territory. So, how was it, especially where you were from, professional wrestling? Was it available? Was it just one promotion? What was it like at that wrestling scene?
In South Africa, we had pretty good wrestling scene in like the 60s, 70s, 80s, even early 90s. When my father passed away in '99, it kind of died down for a couple of years. There's some great wrestlers who have come from there, some good indie promotions right now. But I mean, back in the day, because there wasn't any YouTube or TV or anything. When I was a
Hmm.
kid, I saw Andre the Giant come wrestle our local champion, even Hogan. The Von Erichs like spend a lot of time there. Fit Finley, if you know all these old names, Regal, all these guys. So I grew up watching them. I remember there's a picture of me somewhere with the Undertaker. Like he was like 2 weeks into the business, and he came to wrestle in South Africa way before he was famous. But yeah, it was great. My dad was my hero, and he was the ultimate heel. South African wrestling. Everybody knew who he was, and yeah, I've been around this business my whole life. My granddad was a boxing promoter, and my dad was a lawyer, but he was like, no, 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 no. He kind of transitioned into pro wrestling and entertainment.
So, how was it growing up and then finding, your passion for professional wrestling? Did you stay in South Africa, and when did you start to branch out a little bit?
So the plan, my dad had like a plan laid out for me. I was going to go to Japan, live in the dojo for a while, go to Mexico, Berlin, like do all these like get the old school way of territories and stuff like that. But unfortunately, in '99, my dad died, and I didn't have any of those contacts. And I tried really hard to get into Japan. It was really hard going from South Africa because hardly anybody from South Africa has ever made it, right? So they're like, well,
Hmm.
wow, that's wrestling. There's wrestling down there. So I ended up going to the UK. I went to college there, and for a few years, I didn't even like watch wrestling after my dad passed, because I was just so heartbroken, and that was our thing we did together.
Hmm.
First match was against him. In fact, during that time, everybody's first match was against him in South Africa. Anyway, so I lived in Europe for a long time, and I one day just walked into this indie event, and I saw AJ Styles wrestle Johnny Storm, and I was like, wow. And I just started training the next day, worked the independent circuit in the UK. Back then at the school that I was training, guys like Osprey and Haskins and Marty Skrull, they were like kids. They were like 15, 16-year-old kids. And I was like, wow, these guys are going to be great one day. And look at them now, all super famous. And then, I lived there for 5 years. I ended up going back to South Africa because the local promotion had a TV show. We did really well. We were on one of the main channels in South Africa. And at that time, I was like, wow, I applied myself to it. I studied wrestling. Dr. Tom used to say this: what's old is new, and what's new is old. So I studied old wrestling, and I worked on my character stuff, and got tried a bunch of different stuff, and like worked out every single day in the ring, in the gym. And then I got invited for a tryout in FCW, and then the rest is history.
How did that tryout come about?
Wow. It, I, uh, I felt that I was ready, And at the time, we were still sending tapes to the WWE head office, and I would just send my tapes to like everybody's name I can find, that worked at the office, Stephanie, Hunter, like Shane, everybody's name I can find. At the time, the agent that I was dealing with, he just stopped responding to my emails, and I was like, that was so weird. I guess he got fired, or WWE was in a transition at the time. Long story short, I got invited to the tryout in FCW in Florida, so I flew to the US, and FCW at the time in Tampa. They I walked into this office, and there's Dr. Tom Pritchard, Steve Kern, Norman Smiley, Dusty Rhodes, and it was very intimidating. And they popped my tape in, and Steve Kern was like, "I know this kid. You're the guy from the jungle." Because I guess my 8x10, I'm standing in front of his tree and posing, and they watched this tape, and I thought the match was fantastic. It was one of my favorite matches ever, and I was playing this like stripper porn star character at the time. Did a decent promo and everything, and when they were finished, they all kind of like looked at each other, kept quiet, and I was like, oh shoot. And they went, Dusty was like, well, he can't wrestle for shit, but he can do all the other stuff. So he just liked me from day one. Steve Kern loved me from day one. I think I did a tryout match in an empty arena, or like a dark match, as you call it these days. And they sent it to Vince, I guess. I did like 20, 30 promos. Dusty gave me some tips. He's like, no, this is how we do it in America, kid. And I ended up, he kept changing it, and we kept recording another one and another one and another one. After like probably like 30 or 40 of these promos, he goes, all right, we're just going to go ahead and take that first one. And yeah, they all vouched for me. And then, I went back to South Africa. It took them about a year to get my work papers to work in the US. So during those 12 months, I was just, I got a job at the gym. I was just working really hard. I was like, wow, I'm going to finally the dream is going to come true. I'm going to get paid to just full-time wrestle.
Mhm.
So got into really good shape, worked on some character stuff, got some really cool gear. And then, yeah, I ended up moving to Tampa, Florida, where FCW was at the time. And that was probably one of the most fun years of my life in wrestling.
So how long after that tryout? First of all, how was the tryout?
It was great. I wrestled Ted DiBiase at the time. Him and Cody were pretty big at that
Hmm.
time on TV, and I was a big fan. And it was just smooth. It just flowed.
Hmm.
Like, I mean, we still talk about that today. We didn't really choreograph or plan a lot of stuff like the people do today. We just, old school wrestling. We just call it on the fly, and it turned out great. It was great. It was fantastic. I mean, it got me the job.
How long after your tryout did they offer you the developmental contract? I know it said it took a year to get there, and that's with
Yeah.
everybody that I've talked about. That's like, oh, you're signed, but it's a strenuous, long. It's not see you next week process.
Oh yeah, it took months and months and months. I thought they forgot about me. I ended up calling them. I think it was Ty Bailey at the time, and Mark Laurinaitis, which both his brothers worked in South Africa in the territory days.
Hmm.
So he knew who I was. He put in a good word for me. It took a while. I don't remember the timeline. It was probably a couple of months, and then you have to go through all the physicals and the drug tests and stuff like that from their doctor. So I
Hmm.
flew all the way to Pittsburgh from South Africa. It's a 16, 17, 18-hour flight, um, just for the night. Just do the test and then fly back. Here I come to the US just with a little backpack, and the security at the time flagged me. And they're like, this is strange. Why would you come all this way with one little bag? And I try to explain to them, I did the physical test, all the drug tests, the blood tests, and everything. Flew back to South Africa. I didn't think anything of it. Didn't hear anything from them for a while. And I was like, wait, they spend the money on that, so surely they're working on some stuff. And yeah, eventually they were like, yeah, we offered you the deal. It was a great deal. I didn't even look at the number. To be honest, I was like, wow, I'm moving to the US. I'm gonna be wrestling full time. I'm gonna get paid to do what I love. And yeah, it took them about, it was like 11, 12 months to get the papers. It was at the end of 2009 when we had the financial crash too. I didn't realize it at the time, but when I started work my first week, I walked into FCW, and I just looked around, and there was like 80, 90 guys that were really good at the time, and they all looked amazing. And I was like, whoa, how am I going to stand out here? And I ended up getting my first check, and they gave me a moving check because I moved from overseas. And when I got my first check, they were actually paid me double than what the contract was. So I was like, did they make a mistake? It's like, I'm not sure how this stuff works. And I'm not going to say anything. I'm just going to wrestle every day. We train every single day. It was fantastic.
So what was your first initial thoughts of what WWE developmental was back then? Because it's not what it is today.
No, I mean, it was pretty awesome because I walked in there. I think it was me and Loki. We got there on the same day. Now think about this. Like there's probably 100, 120 guys there. So it's really hard to stand out. And even if you're a coach, someone new comes in. If he's not like a top star on the indies, which no hardly anybody was, Loki probably at the time, they don't know who you are, right?
Hmm.
So the first day you get there, they just call the two new guys into the ring, and they're like, "Here, you guys have 5, 6 minutes. Go put on a match. Let's at least assess and see what you guys can do, what you're capable of." So it was me and Loki the first day, and I've been watching Key for years and years and years. I was even at a seminar he did in London, England, years before that, and I knew his style, and we just went out there and we had the craziest strong style match. We beat the crap out of each other. And at the time, you had to work your way up to the show, right? So
Hmm.
you set up the ring, you work security, or you do take the ring jackets, whatever it is, and you kind of work your way up to the show. It takes months. And I think after this match with Keith, um, it used to swap between Dusty and Kern, who would do the booking for the live events on the
Hmm.
weekends. I just remember like Dusty yelling to Kern. He goes, "Hey, Kern, who's the main event this weekend? Put these two guys on instead." So it was like from the get go, I got to get in there the first day too. People looked at me and was like, "Who's this little kid from South Africa?" So, um, what happens in wrestling, it happens in college. Anything that someone new comes in, it's not bullying, but it's like kind of hazing. Like, "Hey, who are
Hmm.
you? Who are you?" But after we had that main event, everyone was like, "Oh man, this guy's legit. He's awesome." So then everyone wanted to be my friend.
It seems like FCW was like the first developmental to like try to bring in outside rest that weren't wrestlers, that were models, divas, football players. How was it like going through all of that?
It was great. So I mean, everything goes through stages, right? At that
Hmm.
stage, they were just signing a bunch of like football players, and I remember signing a lot of models. There were so many hot chicks there at one stage. I can tell you so many funny stories about that too, because a lot of them didn't know anything about wrestling, and there were some really talented dudes from football background, and a lot of them didn't make it because they didn't watch wrestling, they didn't have that passion, you
Hmm.
know. I mean, there were a few guys that I thought was going to be massive stars one day, and I don't know if you've caught the new Deadpool movie, but the one kid, I'm saying kid, he's my age. He played Juggernaut. He
Hmm.
was one of the first dudes I met there, and we kind of hit it off, and we've been friends ever since. But yeah, I've met some interesting people. Yeah, it was a weird time too because the people that could work, we were kind of not responsible, but we had to teach the other guys because you wanted to have good matches, right? So
Hmm.
we worked out every single day in the ring, in the gym, just just working on all these people, and it goes through cycles. Like right after that, when it became NXT and moved to Orlando, they just hired like all the good indie guys. That's when like um, Kevin Owens and all those guys came through, and the product just switched immediately. It was like a massive massive jump. But right before they moved to Orlando, we were all on the road already as doing the Nexus stuff. But it was an incredible experience, man. All happened so fast.
Hmm.
In developmental, everyone's just like, "Oh, I need to get on TV. I need to get on TV." I didn't care about any of that stuff. I was just like, "I'm getting paid to wrestle. Who cares? Like, who cares?" And then yeah, 10 months fly by and they pitch us this NXT show, and it happened so quickly. And yeah, next thing we know, we were doing the Nexus invasion.
Was there any coaches that worked with you more than others during your time in FCW?
No, we kind of like worked with everybody, like Dusty was
Hmm.
in charge of promos on Wednesday nights. Norman Smiley, a fantastic technical wrestler. He could teach you any move. I mean, he showed me things like at the time I was already in the business for 15 years, and he showed me so many new things that I didn't even know about. Like he told me of guys to study, like Jim Breaker, all these old school Johnny Saint, these British dudes, was different weird style. And South Africa, we didn't have a style, so I kind of combined all these styles: the strong style and the lucha libre and the catch as can styles, and so they really liked that. But yeah, I forgot the question.
No, just like the coaches, if there was anyone that you worked with more than others.
Not necessarily, you know. No, I got a lot from everybody. Like Norman Smiley still texts me till today. He's like, "How you doing, champ?" Steve Kern too. Like he hates it when I call him sir or Mister. He's like, "Man, just call me Steve." You know, like he'll send me a message every once in a while. I love Dr. Tom Pritchard. I probably learned more from Dr. Tom than I have from my dad, from any coach ever. You know, like it was just little things that he used to tell me. I remember they flew me to New York to have a meeting with Vince, and he just gave me these little tips and tricks that I thought was really weird. You know, I was like, man, who would even think of that? But when I got there and I met Vince, he asked these things and he looked at these things, and I was like, wow, Dr. Tom was right. And throughout my whole career, things that he told us like came to fruition. I was just like, wow, these are like the little gems that you need to make it to the next level. But yeah, I spent a lot of time with Dusty because obviously when I got there, like my promos were really good because, but I had a different style, and I had to blend into the TV style, the WWE style. So there was so many changes that I kind of and if you don't get a lot of mic time or a lot of TV time, you kind of like not lose it. But I mean, some guys are really good at the wrestling part, some guys really
Hmm.
good at the character stuff, right? So we were all trying to blend it all together in FCW. So you'd work promos with Dusty, you do the wrestling stuff with either Kern or Norman Smiley, and then you spend a lot of time with Dr. Tom. He was the head trainer at the time, so we all spent a lot of time with him working on psychology and like movements, and they hired a bunch of different coaches too at the time, working on character stuff, and we did the acting classes. It was just going everywhere. It was like going to a wrestling school. Like you had different classes. It was great.
So when it came time to find who you were going to be, did you have input on it? Did they have an image in mind for who they wanted you to be?
No, they let us pretty much decide at the time too. Like wrestling goes through these eras too. We had the Attitude Era, and it was kind of like the reality era, and we were at the end of that. So at the time, they didn't want anyone with weird names. Like I couldn't use PJ Black for some reason. They asked me if I wanted to, and I said yes, and I signed the papers and everything. And then next week they're like, nope, we're going this direction. Everyone needs two names. Like we couldn't have like an Edge or an Undertaker. Everyone, that's why we had a Wade Barrett and Heath Slater. He was Sebastian Slater at the time. I was Justin Angel. That was my original gimmick, doing like the Chris Angel thing. I just, remember the pretty boy
Hmm.
look. I was like Adam Lambert was really big at the time, and Dusty really, really wanted me to be him. He's like, go study that guy and just be him. So I started doing all this like techno music with the glow sticks, and I was doing all this stuff, and it got over really, really quick at those little armory shows we did in Florida. And they loved it. They loved it, and I was like, all right, I guess this is what I'll be doing for a while. And I was just an angel for forever, like just. And once I got to TV, once NXT started, they announced my name, and it was live at the time, and they announced Justin Gabriel. I was like, what? Who's that? Like, and I asked the writers, I was like, what? They were like, no, Vince changed it. If you have a problem with that, you can go talk to him. And I was like, oh, I guess this is who I am now.
Yeah, let me go over there and just rip his ass real quick.
Yeah, yeah.
Was there any moments that stand out more than others during your time in FCW before the Nexus came about?
Oh, so many, man. Like, so many. My first week I got here, I got to experience my first Halloween. And I remember the Rotundo brothers, Wyndham, oh, rest his soul. What a good man that was. What a good friend of mine. We were just friends since day one, because we were all second and third generation wrestlers. And him and his brother invited me to a Halloween party, and we all dressed up as our favorite wrestlers from the past. There might be some photos floating online of that. It was a fantastic time, but just the brotherhood, the bonds that we formed, like all those Omni shows we did, like traveling through Florida. There was so many cool things, getting to go to WrestleMania.
Hmm.
It's hard to pinpoint just one thing. I think probably the coolest thing that I can remember is when I became FCW champ. I don't know how familiar you are with that time, but in the arena where we wrestled, I was the first person to get that 20, 30-foot banner.
Hmm.
And, they flew me to New York to do the photo shoot for that. And um, yeah, that's probably one of the most memorable things, because here I was doing a photo shoot at Stamford, Connecticut. And guys like Patterson, he's like, who's this guy? And he came down to watch me, and he was just like, I was doing the raving thing, so like people would go nuts. And the story floating around was like he came and he just told Vince, he goes, man, you got to see this kid. People go crazy for him. He also had a lot of influence on my career.
So when Nexus came to be, like how much of a notice did you have? Well, hold on, before we go there, how much notice did you have before when they started filming NXT? Were you
So
one of the
NXT,
original?
yeah. So NXT, the initial plan was to make it a reality show. Because remember
Hmm.
at the time that UFC, the Ultimate Fighter, where they all live in the house,
Hmm.
they were trying to mimic that exact concept. But in true WWE fashion, time ran out, and a week before, they're like, "Oh, we don't have the house, we don't have anything set up. I guess we'll just do some kind of wrestling show where we don't tell you guys any of the script. You just we'll put you on the spot." That's why a lot of it was like really weird and messed up. People were like that they treated us like rookies, and it was an interesting time. But to me, I didn't care. I was like, wow, I live in Florida. I get to wrestle. Now I'm on the road. Like now I'm getting to wrestle. I think my first match was against like Regal. Um, at the time too, which sounds really weird now in hindsight, but there were a lot of things banned, moves banned. You couldn't do German suplexes. We couldn't do chops because Shawn Michaels was doing chops at the time. No super kicks, nothing off the top rope, and you know, a bunch of guys were like, "No, you should see this kid's 450. Like, it's really good. It's really good." And Regal was like, "I've had too many knees in my face. I've broken my jaw too many times. I don't know how safely you can hit it. Can you show me?" And I was like, "Sure." So he put this little crash test dummy in the middle of the ring, and he kept changing it. And I just kept hitting the 450, like perfect, perfect, wherever. And he's like, "All right, I'll let you hit that on me." And John Cena was standing there at the time too. So fast forward months later, they were like, when the Nexus thing happened, that's when I did the exclamation was like the 450 was the last thing. So John was there when that happened. So when that came around, he was like, "Yeah, yeah, that's going to be the exclamation point." Well, I don't know what we had a name for it, but that was the gimmick.
So were you always slated to do the first season of NXT? Because other people I've talked to, it was like I had a week to prepare, and then they threw me in the mix. Was that always how they were going to bring you up that you know of?
Well, they had their list of guys, right, between the
Hmm.
coaches, and just because I was champ, I was always like on that list. There were a few guys that kind of like bumped off the list, and then injuries happened, and they kind of shifted around. It's like wrestling, right? And then things happen, and then someone does really well, and they're like, "Oh, let's put him in there," for some flavor to add different characters and everything. But I was always on that list.
After NXT was over, how when did you guys learn about you were going to do the Nexus?
NXT was over. They sent us back to Florida, and we were like, "Oh wow, okay, what do we do now?" So we kind of just hung around, still went to training and everything, and then we were all living in Tampa, and then ROH came down to Miami, and they're like, "Hey, we need you guys at TV this week." And we're like, "Okay." We went down there. Vince pulled us into the office, laid out this plan for us, and we all were kind of like, in wrestling, what's old is new, and what's new is old. You can always go study an old storyline
Hmm.
or character or anything, and you can kind of just draw inspiration from them to see how you're going to play out the storyline. And the way he laid out, I was like, man, I don't think I've ever seen anything like this. Maybe it was like kind of NWO-esque, but we were rookies. So, we didn't really know what to do. We all kind of just looked at each other and was like, all right. And then when we pulled it off, it was obviously, yeah, the rest is history. People were like, oh, wow, this is the greatest thing ever. And we came back. We didn't really understood what we did until like weeks later, and Vince was like, yeah, perfect. I need more of that. I need more of that. Like change that around. He was the brainchild behind that. It just happened so quickly.
Was there any particular moment that was your favorite during your time in Nexus? Was there anything that was supposed to happen that didn't for you particularly?
Oh, so many things, man. The list goes on. Those things change constantly. Raw's live TV, so things change all the time. Times for matches, like on the fly promos, like all these things. But I was always I'm from the old school, so like wrestling on the fly, that's my forte. So like
Hmm.
that's weird because on TV on Raw, your matches get cut, or sometimes you get added time, or like like they will just give the referee the Iggy, and I was really good at those things, and I proved it too in NXT. So they always threw me in these weird positions, And to me, that's fun, because it's like you have to like it's like improv. You have to like figure out where this is gonna go and still make it make sense, make the
Hmm.
story make sense. And like a lot of the people who were newly trained or like the football players, they didn't understand that they didn't have that skill, I guess, and which is sad. I think it's like a dying skill right now. But that's just the way the business evolves. Like it's different, and you have to keep evolving with it. Otherwise, you're gonna get left behind.
That's true. So you did the Nexus, you did the core, you teamed with Tyson Kidd. They seem to like did they just view you as like a tag team guy for the longest time, you felt?
No, we were just kind of like floating around. We
Hmm.
pitched the ball. We get to pitch a lot of stuff and what works. And at the time, guys like Fit Finley, D. Malenko, IRS, those guys I looked up to. They were the minds. They were the agents at the time. They were just fantastic wrestling minds. Anything you needed, you can go to them. And Tyson has been wrestling forever too. And we came up with this idea and to do some stuff, just to try it out. And we tried it out on some live events, and it went great. Got great feedback. Like they all loved it. And then a little push started, and I think Tyson, he got hurt. He's been wrestling for 16 years at that time, and he's never been injured. And he blew his knee out. We still finished the match, and he still worked the next night. And he was like, "I gotta go check." And he was injured. And he came back. We kind of carried that on. Then I got injured, and then I came back, and then something happened. So that little push never really happened. I feel like it could have been great if it wasn't for the injuries.
Hmm. Is there anything that is there a goal that you had that you didn't get to accomplish in WWE? Something you would have, maybe it was presented and it just didn't happen, or something that you would like to have done?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things. I pitched a lot of different storylines. That like there's a lot of things that I really wanted to do. So many, but like I had my little list that I wanted to do. I wanted to, be at WrestleMania, wrestle at Tokyo Dome, Kurgan Hall, Arena de Mexico. Like, I wrestled in 66 countries now, and most of those countries were with WWE. So, that was always the goal for me, just to travel the world and wrestle. And I feel like I did that. And you can always say like, oh, I wanted to do more. I should have done this, or this storyline should have been better. Like
Hmm.
even the next thing, there was less than a year. We didn't even have a WrestleMania. That
Hmm.
storyline dragged out much, much longer.
I totally agree with that, and I feel like sometimes they just pull the plug on something way too fast.
Oh, and it happens all the time. At that
Hmm.
time too, there were just so many people on the road, like,
Hmm.
and they just focused on the main storyline, so everyone else just got kind of shoved to the back.
Before you made your decision to leave WWE, what, if you don't mind me asking, what led up to that?
There was a bunch of stuff. Um, I was pitching different storylines and characters. I was pitching and pitching and pitching and pitching, and then they just kept saying no, 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 and I was just sitting around. I wasn't even on TV, but I had to fly to TV, so you sit in catering, and it was, wrestling is my art. I want to
Hmm.
work. I want to like do fun stuff, and then um, yeah, it just didn't go anywhere, and I kind of started doubting myself. I was like, man, my idea's not good. Am I not good enough?
Hmm.
And I just went through that phase where I think everyone in life goes through, but especially wrestlers. And I was just like, man, I feel like I have so much more to offer. I can't do these like 5 minute main event matches,
Hmm.
like, and it was probably the hardest decision I ever had to make, because that's where I always wanted to be. And even Vince said to me, he's like, I know what you want to do. He's like, go work in Japan, go work some indies and stuff, and see what happens. And I was like, all right, and I did that. I've never
Hmm.
worked the independent circuit in the US. Like the first thing I did was like just take a bunch of bookings. I was all over the show. Worked all my favorite matches, dream matches. I think one of my first matches was against Ricochet, way before he was famous. What an awesome match! It's online somewhere. I got to wrestle AJ Styles the next week when he was New Japan Heavyweight Champion. I was supposed to go over in that match, but then he won the belt, so he could lose to me. Uh, yeah, it was great. It was well, what a time that was.
How scary of a decision was that to leave? It's almost like a comfort, and then now it's all on you. Like you're jumping into that. But you said you took a shitload of bookings and stayed busy and busy and busy. So that must have reassured you that you are that good. You did have that value, and you could still accomplish all these goals outside of WWE.
Yeah, it was awesome, and now I got to show who PJ Black really was. Like everyone remembers Justin Gabriel, but I was only him for like 5, 6 years up in PJ Black for 20 years. Um, so I was just like, oh, man, once I'm done with this career, hopefully people get to remember PJ Black. So now I got to do different stuff. All those matches with AJ, and at the time Lucha Underground was just starting up too, and they called me for the first season, and I was like, I don't want to sign a contract with anybody else right now. I like being free and just doing the independent circuit and like getting to go to all these cool countries that, I was with WWE, but now I can spend more time there and like work
Hmm.
the whole circuit and like, go sightseeing and do all that stuff. And I told them to call me back a year later. A year later, on the day, they called me back, and since then, season one aired on TV, and I watched it, and I was like, "Wow, this is great! How did I say no to this?" And then that was like the next journey.
So how was shifting to that, and then you did Lucha, and then you did Ring of Honor. So how does that differ, and how was that more fun for you to do stuff, more freedom?
Yeah, like certain people give you more freedom depending on how high up you are on the card, and they I guess are more susceptible to your ideas and stuff like
Hmm.
that. I did that short stint with Global Force Wrestling too, and Jeff Jarrett was like, "You're gonna be my guy. You want to promo? Like, don't worry about the time. Just we'll cut it from somebody else. Just do your thing." And I went in there. We did that Vegas show. I cut that long promo. Did a bunch of matches. We did that tournament. That was the first next gen champion. That was a fun little stint too. We traveled all over the country working baseball fields. I don't know what you
Hmm.
call them. That was fun to watch one of my idols give me this much. I wouldn't say power, but freedom to do whatever I wanted. And I felt like this character developed. That's what I developed, the Daredevil character. And, that was a fun time. It was cool too because that's what I thought wrestling was, right? Like
Hmm.
having all this freedom. And WWE kind of just like depending on how you're on the card, you kind of just follow the script, and that's fine too. A lot of people love doing that, but there's a lot of wrestlers who don't like doing that thing. We like to like express ourselves. Like that's why these indie matches are so fun. Like
Hmm.
me and Ricochet got to do whatever we wanted, and we just went all out. I was like, hey, have you done a reverse run off the top rope? He was like, no, but let's try it. It was great. You got to experiment with stuff, and that I feel like that's what made the Attitude Era great because everyone was just like free, like
Hmm.
have control, and you just do a bunch of stuff and see what got over.
I
But I mean,
agree.
it's a business, right? It's a business, and it's a corporate business now with sponsorships and the PG era we went into. It's a different ball game. Can't complain about that. You have to just do your job.
Hmm. How did Ring of Honor come about?
Um, I forgot how that came about. I think I was in Vegas for a weekend for an indie show, and they were running the big arena at the time. Um, Remember when they tried to run that big arena?
Hmm.
And yeah, I just stopped by, just talked to the guys, and I forgot how that went, but they were like, "Hey, do you want to do a couple of shows?" And they was actually signing a bunch of people because they lost a lot of their big names at the
Hmm.
time. Um, yeah, and I guess I was just there at the right place at the right time.
Any particular moments stand out during your time there working with Ring of
Ring
Honor? Hmm.
Oh wow, so many cool matches, so many cool ones, man. I that storyline I did with Flip Gordon, where I played his doctor, that was fantastic. Brian Johnson, where I got to mentor him, sort of this Karate Kid storyline, that was awesome to me. One of the matches that stood out to me the most, I mean, there were so many, against Jeff Cobb, who wrestled in Washington. That's where
Hmm.
I tore my bicep and we still finished the match though. It was one of the most fun matches I've ever done. Because I've watched that guy's a powerhouse. So he's just like a machine. He can just do anything. And again, we didn't have any handcuffs on. We could just do whatever we wanted. So we went all out in that match. I mean, we kept it a little bit back because it was the first time we worked, but that match really stands out to me.
So leaving WWE, standing out on your own, being extremely successful, has there been any opportunities or talks with WWE over the years of possibly coming back, doing something? Is there any
Yeah,
interest?
there's been quite a few, and the talks never go anywhere. They, I'm getting a little bit older now. They recently wanted me to be a coach at, because I've been in this business almost
Hmm.
30 over 30 years now, like wrestling 27. Um, to be a coach. That kind of like went nowhere, But I mean, that was during the transition stage where
Hmm.
I think who bought as it Anthem? What's the company that bought them in UFC? They were kind of in the transition, so
Hmm.
I didn't really bother them too much about that. Like those talks kind of just fell away, and then I just I got a bunch of bookings. I went to go live in Europe for a while, and I'm trying to revive the scene in South Africa too. So I kept going there for like 2, 3, 4 months at a time, just teaching seminars. There's so many uh, little schools popping up everywhere and great talent. And I feel like that's my next journey. Like I want to teach these kids what I've learned in the last 30 years. And, I didn't have that opportunity to pick
Hmm.
people's brains at the time. So I just want to like kind of give back. So I've been out in and out of the country for a long time. I mean, I live in Los Angeles, but I was traveling so much. I remember like running into Billy Corgan and he was like, you live in the US? And I was like, yeah. I was like, let me do some shows. And I ended up doing some of the NWA shows and uh, yeah, it was just a wild time, and it's I'm getting older right now, right? I
Hmm.
mean, I can still go, I can still hang with anybody, but I gotta kind of think of the next step. But yeah, I love teaching seminars. I used to go to Australia twice a year and do like these weekly seminars, and I teach them all over, like in France. I've done Romania, like teaching seminars at all these weird places, and I enjoy it. I love it. Vince used to say, "Hey, whenever someone asks you what you do for a living, you go, I put smiles on kids' faces." So like you seeing how much these kids get out of these seminars, just that made me so happy, and I enjoy doing that. So yeah, I ended up contacting NXT, and we went through some interview process thing, and yeah, and then that transition happened. It kind of just faded away. But there were talks throughout the years from stuff like Nexus reunions, but it's so hard because everyone is all
Hmm.
scattered all over the place, and people get signed by other companies, so it was kind of hard. So, I mean, there's been a lot of talks, but yeah, obviously nothing happened.
So when it's time to hang up your boots, coaching is something you would love to do,
Yeah, no, definitely,
like in a
definitely.
full time role.
Yeah, I mean, I love wrestling.
Hmm.
I grew up in this business, so I'd love to do something like that. And apparently, I'm really good at it. Who knew? Who knew? You find yeah, I'd love to. Like the seat, South Africa. Many people don't know this, but I think it's the third biggest numbers on TV. And there's only 50 million people in the country. Like, and we get higher numbers than India, like countries with like billions of people.
Hmm.
I definitely want to go back there and build that scene eventually. I've been toying with the idea, but then I get a lot of bookings. I was supposed to be in Europe all summer, and then I got this injury, so I had to cancel everything for the next 6 months. So maybe that's the universe's way of telling me to just sit down, kind of like figure out what your next step is. We'll see. Honestly, I have no idea. I mean, we'll see where this goes.
That was going to be my next question. What was next for PJ Black?
Yeah, I mean, I got injured. Like, I finally got. Uh, I think I got injured at AEW. I did the ROH tapings. When they came to LA, we did the Forum show, and then the next night we were at uh, Palm Springs, and that's why I got injured. And I feel if I didn't get injured, I mean that probably would have
Hmm.
gone somewhere for sure. And I'm really sad about that. But I'm trying not to dwell on that and get too depressed. But
Hmm.
now I'm kind of just back at square one. Just got to heal this wheel first, and then see what the next step is. So I'm kind of just focusing on getting better and getting back to where I was. I feel like the older I get, the more not rugged, for lack
Hmm.
of better term, but it's the character's evolving all the
Hmm.
time. In wrestling, you have to, like I said earlier, you have to evolve with it, or you get left behind. I mean, there's guys like Rey Mysterio. He's just Rey Mysterio.
Hmm.
John Morrison looked the same throughout his life, but then you look at guys like Jericho. Like, how many transitions has he done? You kind of just
Hmm.
adapt to different characters, and he keeps evolving, and I love that. I love that. So I try to do the same. I pitch so many cool characters. Like, I actually had like the shaman character I was pitching to everybody, and WWE loved it. They were like, "Oh, it's a little bit weird. It's a little bit fringe." And I was like, "Exactly. That's the point. You need the character needs to ask more questions. Like Bray Wyatt was helping me out at the time, so that was the character was like that. It was very esoteric, occultish.
Hmm.
Uh, it would have been fun, man. I would have loved to bring that character to life. I spent so much money on the gear and the new music and all of that, and then life happens. I never got to. I mean, the character kind of briefly appeared on the Young Bucks YouTube show doing mixing a little potion together, and then that was going to be the start, and it was going to like evolve from there. But that also didn't go anywhere. That's wrestling, you know.
Hmm.
There's so many shows on TV these days. It's hard to keep up with
Hmm.
everything. It's there's so many so much great talent on the independent circuit too, and all over the world now. Like wrestling's a universal language. Like I said, I wrestled in 66 countries. There's some countries we go to, and you're like, these people don't watch wrestling, and they do. You know, they don't speak any English, but they understand wrestling.
Hmm. I agree, and that's cool that that Wyndham was helping you with that. What better mind to work with when it comes to that the occult or the creepiness or the eeriness? Someone to work with like him could truly
Right.
bring that to life.
Right, and he was one of my first friends when I moved to Florida. You know, so I mean,
Hmm.
we've always had that strong bond, and he wanted to help, and he loved that stuff. That was him. You know, he was cool, and he loved what I was doing too. He goes, "Oh, you should try this and try it around." I don't know if that promo is floating around online. I don't know if it ever got released, but maybe I will because I spent so much time and effort on that. Maybe I'll just release it on one of my socials soon. But it came out really well. But it's really weird, right? It's kind of like
Hmm.
the Wyatt stuff, but even a step further. People are like, huh?
So during your downtime right now, are you able to do like seminars, or are you just gonna take like a complete break?
Yeah, for the next few months, I'm just focusing on getting better. I'm on
Hmm.
my last week of crutches still. I've been on crutches for 6 weeks. You know, I can kind of walk finally, but now it's the next step. You know, now I got to do rehab every day, so I don't really have time for much.
Hmm.
It's just rehab every single day. You know, like go to the physio, go to the hyperbaric chamber, red light therapy, go for the massages, and then obviously the strengthening stuff. That takes a lot of time. I mean, I
Hmm.
lost so much weight. Look how skinny I am. My legs are so skinny. I have to like rebuild all those muscles around the knee. You know, it's gonna take a long time. Like when I broke my ankles, I mean, broken bones are easy. You know, once the bone fuses, at
Hmm.
6 weeks, you can start at least working out again, and you have muscle memory, so it comes back quickly. Like now, I've been just sitting around for 6 weeks, so the muscle atrophy is crazy. So it's just like you know it's a long journey. So I'm just kind of trying to focus on this right now, so I can at least get back to the ring. And once I can run the ropes, and then I'll
Hmm.
go start teaching for a while, and I can kind of that way I can play around with the students at least, and just start moving around again and doing stuff, and then we'll take it from there.
If you had any advice to give to anybody getting into professional wrestling, what would it be?
Um, just study the craft. You know, like go watch the old stuff, even if you don't use it. Go watch it and see where a lot of these things come from. One of these characters and these moves, and like study all the styles. And I mean, wrestling has changed a lot now. It's a lot of like character based stuff. So yeah, it's like practice promos every single day. Work on characters. Just throw a bunch of shit to the wall and then see what sticks. That's a famous Dusty quote. Just see what works for you, you know, because I mean, you might start out. I see a lot of kids like these days, and they're like, "Oh, I already have my move set. Here's my entrance, my character." I'm like, "Oh, bro, that's gonna change so much. Like as you evolve, you kind of figure out what you're really good at and what you're not good at and what you should work on. You know, you don't pick where you're gonna go. You kind of like this industry will mold you, and that's the best thing. Like just go to as many seminars as possible. Some kids just stay at one school their whole lives. For me, you know, like when I was living in Europe, you know, guys like Low Key and AJ Styles, Christopher Daniels, like these guys came to do seminars all the time. And if I can give anybody advice, is just go and get experience from as many places as possible, do as many seminars as possible. That really helps out a lot, especially if you want to get onto TV. You know, like one of my classes I teach, I was like, okay, if you want to make it to WWE, this is what you got to do. These are the questions you got to ask. These are the people you got to please. Same thing for TNA, but you know, like I explained to the kids, like you can make a great living just working the independent circuit too. I mean, there's
Hmm.
so many shows all over the world, right? In, in the US a lot, but like all over the world too. So you can make a great living if you want to do that, but just keep evolving, keep training, and just get as much experience as possible. Obviously watch as much stuff as possible too.
Where can people reach out to you at?
I'm pretty active on Instagram, PJ450. My website's down a little bit now. I don't know if I'm gonna re-up that. We'll see. And then Twitter, I'm not really that active, but I'm Darewolf333 on there.
Well, I just want to say thank you for taking some time out today, talk a little bit about your career. Thank you for what you've done for professional wrestling and what you continue to do. It's truly been an honor today.
Oh man, thank you. That means a lot to me. You know, like that's why we do it at the end of the day. We do it for the fans, and like it makes my heart warm when you say stuff like that. It's like, oh, I did I did contribute a lot of things to this business, you know, and I'll keep doing so.
If there's ever anything that I can do, please feel free to reach out.
I appreciate that. I will. I got your details now.
Thank you. I appreciate that.